Hello all and Happy New Year. So my name is Ave and I am from TechSisters and today I am the event host. So we have at least two special moments today. This is the TechSisters this year's first event and also the very first TechSisters YouTube live event. Let's hope everything goes really smooth. So the topic is service design. And as I'm not the expert on this field, then I have a guest here, Jana Kukk. Jana has been active in the service design field over 10 years, with experience in service design as well as consulting. She has worked with organizations such as SEB, Luminor, Telia, G4S, Volvo Trucks, and so many others. And holds also the Ph.D. on the field. Beside that, she continues her research in the field at TalTech University. So Jana will give us around 60-minute talk. And if you have questions, then please add them to the comment box next to the live feed. Be active, ask many questions, and then we will have an interesting discussion around this topic and get the maximum out of Jana. And also, many thanks to Igloo OÜ, who is helping us to make a gift to the Jana. Probably you haven't not get it already, but it will come. So this is all from my side now, and Jana, floor is yours.
Thank you, Ame. that was one interesting presentation, and I'm very much looking forward for the presents. It's always very exciting, not knowing what you're going to get. At least in almost like a Santa Claus.
Yeah, soon.
All right, and also when you're going to get, so that moment of excitement as well. So thanks for the introduction. Actually, I checked on my phone a second ago if anybody's actually watching, because I think this is my biggest fear of the last year, doing all the webinars. Not being sure if anybody actually cares of the topic that I would like to talk about. And it seems that there are quite a few people. So hi guys, I don't see you. I just see the green light in my computer. Hoping you're there and not asleep yet. And as we talked with Ava before, if you have any questions during my talk, then I really would be happy in a way to interact with you. So let's agree that if you have anything to ask or if you have anything to comment, please go ahead and type your comments or questions in the YouTube comment section. Or if you're shy and if you don't feel like you would like to publicly post anything, then you can also actually send me a message on social media like LinkedIn or a Messenger. I cannot guarantee I would see that immediately, but I will try to check on the go. So just to keep the discussion going, because I'm really not a huge fan of one-sided monologue. So let's kick off. I was asked here today to talk about service design and in more particular to talk about three things. First of all, what it is. So what is the methodology of service design and why does it exist and why did it suddenly become so popular these days? The second thing I was supposed to talk about is to explain a bit what is it that service designers do. And the third one is actually connected very closely to the previous two. In case you find everything that I will tell you exciting enough to try it out yourself, then I will very briefly mention where to learn service design or how to become a service designer, if that's something that you would be interested in the future. So about myself, yes, I am a service designer, and I have been doing that for far more years than I have actually known the term of service design. I have been a management consultant for a while, and then I was a marketing person. And somehow when it started to take over the business consultancy field, I stumbled upon service design, and it seemed exactly the tool to solve most of the problems that companies were turning towards me to help them solve. And by today, actually, I'm a co-founder of a service design agency, and we work with small, medium, and large corps across Europe, and actually by now across the globe, to help them create services that their customers would actually love. To explain a bit why or how service design changes the way that company operates, I usually show my clients this picture. And surprisingly, many people actually can relate to that, because even if you don't have small children yourself at the moment and you are not trying to feed them anything healthy, then you probably remember yourself around this age, and when your mom tried to convince you to eat a piece of broccoli or Brussels sprouts or something like this, and you probably remember the feeling of being tortured, more or less. And this is exactly what companies are doing to their customers these days quite a lot. They're chasing them, trying to convince that whatever they're doing is actually super useful and will improve your life. And if you buy our product or service, you will be so much happier than you are without it. But for some reason, the customers are not so convinced. And actually, it might be true. So the company could be actually delivering something that is super useful. And maybe even in about 30 years, just like this kids, this person will realize that it was actually a great idea. But this particular moment, it seems like torture. And the only thing that the customer usually wants when companies approach them is just to leave them alone. So what service design tries to do is to avoid this kind of situation. We want to change value propositions, or we want to change the offerings in a way that they're actually useful for people, they're desirable, and they're also at the same time profitable for the companies that deliver them. I'm going to start with walking you through the typical requests that service designers get. So out of these 3 questions that I'm supposed to cover today, I'm going to start with the second one. What is it that service designers actually do? And I'm going to do that through the prism of what the clients usually request and how it turns out. So the most typical, or one of the most typical requests, is to help companies generate more ideas for launching a new product or to improving an existing service. But generally, it's perceived that designers are the creative kind, and therefore we're the best people to turn for ideas. What the problem with this request is that I genuinely believe that there is never any lack of ideas in any company. I think if you actually invite together a meeting at any project, in any group of people, and you just throw the question in the air of what should we or what could we possibly do, you will end up with a huge list of suggestions. You're going to end up with ideas, with proposals for different features that could be implemented, and most probably majority of them is actually pretty good, or sounds at least pretty decent and value-adding on paper. So the question is which ones to implement, and the question is that what happens if we actually start implementing all of those great suggestions that we get from around the table? And I don't know how old you guys are on the other side of the camera, but some of you actually might remember this is a thing that Google came out with. I don't even dare to say how many years ago, but it was a thing. It's called it was called Google Wave. I think Google actually promoted it before launching. They created the whole mystery around it for quite a bit. Everybody was super excited. You had to get a special invitation to be among the first ones to be onboarded. And when the users got access to that, everybody was just very confused. What is that? And literally nobody could actually figure out how the hell this works, because essentially Google Wave incorporated every single feature that you could possibly come up with. It was a chat, it was an email, it was a file sharing space. You could even play chess with people in here. So everything you could possibly imagine was squeezed into one space. Actually, I think even the presenters during the first demo were getting confused and messed up a couple of times because they're not quite sure how it works themselves. And this is the product that results of this kind of endless ideation of generating more and more ideas. So the quantity of ideas is not the thing that creates value. People are only getting confused. Another example of this feature shock is I'm sure laying in your living rooms. If you're at home, you have one of those, most probably somewhere very close to you on the sofa as well. Majority of us has plenty of different remotes lying around the house, and I'm pretty sure that most of them, about probably 90%, look just like the one on the left. So it has a lot of buttons. It has pretty much every single function you could possibly imagine, or even the functions you don't know your TV can possibly do. But it has everything that the producer of TV could think about. However, the value of such remote is pretty low for you as a user because well, unfortunately, we cannot really interact with you guys right now. But if you think about it, what sort of buttons do you actually use on this one? Not sure about you, but for me, it's probably on and off, the Netflix button and the volume up and down. That's more or less that. Also the arrows. And there's a whole bunch more. And I have not a single idea what those do. And this is quite typical. So if you think of which buttons would you use with your parents or your grandma or your kids, what kind of buttons they would be pushing, generally the number of the ones that actually creates value is pretty low. The one on the right is the, a device that is definitely not everybody's favorite, but it has a pretty huge amount of fans. There's people who absolutely hate everything that Apple produces, and then there are people who think that these devices are the best ones, and they're well prepared to pay a lot more. And as we tend to measure value in money, so for some reason, for us, it's equivalents of euros. It's pretty clear which one is valued more. And it's definitely not the quantity of features or quantity of ideas that creates the value for the user. So to sum up, or to kind of make a conclusion here, so there's a Dilbert drawing as well to illustrate my point, but to kind of summarize the point, the job that service designers actually do when we get invited to bring new ideas or to propose innovative solutions, we actually don't propose anything. We throw the question back to the question back to the audience. We ask them to actually share their thoughts or their consideration, and we help them to figure out what would create the biggest value for customers, and which ideas, no matter how great they seem, would actually be just a distraction that in theory for the developers or the product owners might be something they fall in love with, but for the user, probably not worth all the noise that it creates when it comes to the final product. The second question that we get approached with is, well, actually, I put it on this slide in a very polite way. How it's actually phrased is that help us make our stupid customers do what we want. Generally, people don't tend to behave as companies want them to, so they blame the customer for that, of course. And the request is that maybe service design is something that could possibly help users to go the way that company would prefer them to go, and for God's sake, not click anywhere where they're not supposed to click, or not use any physical space features that they're not supposed to touch. And it's funny, but so because everybody sort of understands that blaming customers of being stupid is well, it's not exactly right. But somehow you still hear that a lot more that you would actually expect. So typically, we actually get a situation that looks more or less like this. Of course, this is a metaphor, but I would say that if you have a product or service that actually needs a manual saying how does the user need to behave, or which way to go, or which button to push first, you have a problem. And it's not the customer that you need to fix. It's actually the thing that you are delivering to the customer. So this is the part where we start a very careful discussion. Because, you know, if we would just jump into the corporate board saying it's not your customer who is stupid, it's you, probably we would not be very listened to in the long term, or we would definitely not be invited back. So we have to start a very careful discussion and really involve everybody in the room into seeing things from customers' perspective. And that can turn out in a pretty interesting way, because I understand that I'm probably not the first one showing you this slide or the statistics of the fact that 80% of companies are convinced they're doing something great, and only 8% of people agree with them, or their users agree with them. But this is something that's even knowing that fact, everybody tends to overlook, because everybody thinks that their customers are the ones in the 8%. Everybody is very convinced that, yes, my competitors, my partners, everybody else needs to review what they're doing, but it's not me. Because, well, it's actually very human how we tend to think. It's very egocentric, and it's not because we have bad we have been taught in the wrong way or whatever else. It's just us being human. Everybody's egocentric, and that's just something you have to take into account. But what it means in practice for companies who are trying and looking into customer value, and who are looking into how to improve this value for as much as they could, what it looks like is pretty much like this. So if you work in a certain field, very fast you start to take everything that surrounds you as normality. You start to understand your professional lingo. You start to speak in certain terms that normal people outside your organizations, they don't understand. You start to think in maybe certain processes. You start to perceive things in a certain way. Here, just to recap. The request the third request that service designers gets when being approached by the organizations is just to get everything done and hand it over. And in a way that's very efficient, because if the company outsources stuff, it might happen that they actually get done a bit more quickly than they would be done in-house because of different dependencies, the parallel projects and all that. But there's also a very big problem that is caused by the fact that typically you would expect service designer to sort of initiate the project and to gradually step out or to kind of reduce the effort being spent on the project and to slowly hand it over to the business unit, so that in the development phase and delivery, business takes over and the designers sort of step back and just do the moral support. However, when the service designers are being invited in to do such project, what usually happens in practice is that it's the designers who drag the projects through all the phases. They do the discovery, they define a problem, they develop the solution, and when it's finally moment for go live, when it's time to kind of put it live and hand it over to the customer, there's simply nobody there that would like to take over. And the reason for that is, well, pretty human as well. Nobody wants to, metaphorically speaking, nobody wants to raise somebody else's child. So if you work on something, if you develop a product, then it's your baby. And if somebody else develops a project or a product and then comes to you and says, here it is, it's ready, please take over and work with it, the first thing you typically want to do, you want to make changes. So it's quite human and it's quite practical. But this is why it's maybe not the best idea to expect full to complete execution from the external design team. Instead, what we do is we try to avoid this syndrome of, wasn't invented here. We actually try to facilitate the discussion in the company with all the stakeholders, all the people who in a way are related to the project. We facilitate co-creation project in-house. And if we do our job well, the thing is, or the paradox is, if we do everything well from outside our side, if we do it in a way that it's good quality service design, then the client or the business unit feels that we were completely useless, meaning service designers, because they feel that everything that has been created, the sense of ownership is definitely very strong from their side. And this is the paradox. So the better you do your job, the more the business unit feels the ownership and the less they appreciate the input that the service designers made. If service designers create everything by themselves, then it's pretty much inevitable that the business unit simply does not take over. So this is the biggest struggle, I would say, we have to work with on a daily basis. But nevertheless, of course, it makes, I would say that it makes long-term collaboration with the organization quite challenging, this kind of paradox. But it's also the thing that makes it super interesting, how to convince even the people who are opposing maybe some innovations or the changes the most, how to convince them and get them on board, and how to get them collaborate and co-create with you, regardless of their initial point of view. So this is what we do, or what people ask us to do and what we actually do. And maybe now it's about time to finally discuss a bit what service design actually is, because it's a mysterious word. Everybody understands, or I think that they think they understand what is service. Everybody more or less knows what design is, but if you put those two together, then it's a complete mystery, and nobody quite understands how it works and how it actually functions. So, of course, it wouldn't be a design presentation without Steve Jobs. But I actually like another slide that proves the same points of the sentence that illustrates an iceberg. We indeed, we start work with the services. So we start working with the value proposition and what kind of value we would want to create for the customers. And we design an ideal customer journey and or ideal product that customer needs to interact with. But usually in 99% of cases, what we find out when we do that is that there is no way that the existing structure, existing system in the company is able to deliver that. So we spend the rest of the probably 80% of the project working or organizing the whole system behind the service or the product to be able to support and deliver this extraordinary customer experience that we're aiming for. So we're not just making the experience enjoyable or the product pretty, but we actually figure out what needs to be done and how it needs to be delivered in the most efficient way. What is also important to remember is that, yes, when we talk about design thinking, service design, whatever other similar term you're using, yes, we always talk about customer centricity, but it's not about what customer wants. It's not 100% about what are the wishes and let's just, do a questionnaire, get the feedback and do everything that we want. It's about uncovering the needs. So figuring out what is the actual problem that needs to be solved. And the solution also needs to take into account financial reasoning or financial viability. Because you can create a super great solution that solves the problem for a group of customers, but it's absolute nonsense from a financial side. It's too expensive, too complex, and it does not make sense to deliver that. So we actually pay attention to the business criteria of product or service delivery, and we also take into account the limitations from the system side. And by that I mean technology as well as very often legislation or any other limitations that do not allow you to create anything that you can dream about. So it's actually not just about human-centric approach and all that beautiful thing that you might hear everywhere in every corner, but it's also a very, very strong work with the limitations and with making the business model right and making sure that whatever you're creating is actually viable in that sense as well. The process, how it looks on all these slides that you see in trainings, again, I'm pretty sure that you might have seen this double diamond somewhere. It's, two-step process, I would say. The first part is about the research. So this first quadrant of the double diamond, it's about research, discovery, and then definition of the findings. So you sort of go interview people or observe them, you look into their behaviors, you figure out what is it that they need, and somewhere in the center you have the understanding of what needs to be changed. So what is the problem that you're actually solving? The development phase is about generating ideas. It's about picking the ones that might actually work. It's about prototyping and testing with the customers, and finally coming down to this one solution that actually is the right one. So this is how it looks in theory, and it sort of illustrates that equal attention should be paid to all of the parts of the process, right? Here is how it looks typically in most organizations. Well, it's again not surprising because probably for a lot of people, development with all the idea generation and testing out stuff and kind of preparing, showing, well, in corporates it also involves a lot of slideshows. You have worked with some. So a lot of PowerPoints are being created in development phase. So this is something that probably is the most engaging, so to say. This is why this is so heavy in this actual process. And if you pay attention, then the research phase, sort of talking to the customers phase, and just being sure that you are doing the right thing and doing something that is actually needed, it is pretty much left out. So what we're trying to do is to sort of pull the balance back into the parts that are underestimated. And actually, to be honest, in all of the very successful service design projects where the result is something truly outstanding, the discovery and definition phases are actually time-wise and kind of work effort-wise are actually larger than everything that comes after that. So if you actually pay a lot of attention to making sure that you're doing the right thing or checking what kind of thing you need to be doing, then the success in the second half of the process comes a lot easier. So design everything in this process that you just saw is about creating value. So you need to figure out what kind of ideas, what kind of features, what kind of services in general or processes in the organizations are the ones that create value. And as we're slowly running out of time, I will very briefly walk you through to my mind, this is again very subjective. If you probably ask another service designer, that will tell you something else. But this is, to my mind, the most exciting part of the whole thing, to understand what kind of elements of product or service are actually the ones that are most valuable for your customer. And spoiler alerts, these are usually not the ones that you expect. So with any product or service, you can actually sell it in a very different ways. So here you would see that there are a million different ways to sell coffee. But in general, that you can categorize these million different ways in 4 categories. So first one is where you sell raw material. So there's, just the minimum product that customer can go and prepare coffee from themselves at home or wherever else. And this is usually the cheapest one as well. So it's the price of a cup of coffee when you buy just, grounded beans is something like 2 cents per coffee cup. You can buy a product which is already packaged and somebody already did something there for you. You can buy a service. You can buy a service where somebody already prepared the coffee, so you just have to drink it. But there's one other category, which is not even service. Of course, it includes service, but it's an experience. So there's something more. It is completely intangible. It's absolutely rational, and probably everybody absolutely understands that it just does not make sense to buy a €7 coffee cup if the actual price of beans of coffee for the same amount would be about 2 cents. It's anything but rational. But still, Starbucks is a super popular place. They're doing pretty well, and people pay that money, so they value it enough to make that contribution. And what is exciting about it is that what makes Starbucks product so valuable, it is not something tangible. It's the aura, if you want to. So it's something around it that adds value so much that we are willing to pay so much more. And it's interesting that this intangible value actually exists in pretty much every product or every service around us. So as it's, TechSisters event, I have a couple examples that is especially dedicated to ladies. So gentlemen in the audience, if there is any, I'm sorry. You might not be able to relate to those ones. But girls, just think of it for a second. How do you value certain services, right? So if you are going to a salon that provides only one thing two-step process, they wash your hair and they dry it, they blow dry it. So how much would you pay? Like, have a number in your thoughts. Unfortunately, I'm not really able to, ask you out, some numbers from you out loud, but have a number in your head. It's an actual service that exists in the United States, and it's quite popular. I've actually seen a few in Europe as well already. So there's no scissors, no hair dye, no anything. You just go get your hair washed and blow dried. And the pricing for that service is something around that. So you actually have blowout for $49 and more if you choose something else. And of course, there is some cocktails, so you would enjoy a glass of something while you're getting pretty. And it's not the rational value that we're talking about here, because you can go wash your hair for free in your bathroom, and it's obviously not a super necessity that you would pay for, but it's a feeling, right? You're paying for the feeling, or for saving time, or something else that is completely and utterly irrational. Again, another thing that's probably not quite relatable from the gentleman's side, if you think about it, what is the handbag supposed to do? Most probably you would be telling me that it's supposed to fit in stuff that you want to carry with you. So you would have your phone, maybe your bottle of water and something else. And, if we say that, okay, if the function of the handbag is to fit stuff, then the more stuff the bag fits, the more valuable it is, or how does it work? And then you would have handbags that are costing pretty much just as much as my car, and it just does not make sense. So you could probably get a handbag that fits a lot of stuff for about 10-15 euros, and it would be just fine, and it will be doing the job just fine. But you have also the opportunity, and there's plenty of those on the market, and I'm sure a lot of you are secretly dreaming of getting one of those that cost obviously a lot more. And if we would discuss why does it cost so much, well, the status, maybe some ego issues that you could solve with that, or anything like this. And once again, it's something not functional, not rational. It's something completely intangible and completely irrational. So this is the trick about value. So this is why service design is so exciting for me, that whatever you're creating, there's always 3 categories of value next to everything. There's functional. What is the thing supposed to be doing? So if it's a car, it's supposed to drive from point A to point B. There is always a social dimension. So how do I want others to perceive me if I'm using this product or service? So, if it's a fancy car, then my neighbors would be jealous, or would somebody pay more attention to me, and so on. And how do I feel myself? So emotional part, how does this make me feel? So in any kind of value, in any kind of product, you would always have the 3 categories of value. And to be very honest, I have had a lot of discussions with many different clients who have been claiming that, it's probably true for everybody else, but for our customers, they just want the functional thing. I have not yet seen any product or any service that was able to convince me that they don't have the social and emotional dimension about their service or product at all. There's always some. And what is the most interesting thing? So here is the service designer's kind of secret trick. When we design something, or when we have the discussion in the company, what kind of product, what do we need to do to our product to make it more valuable for the customers, then we typically end up discussing functional dimension or the functional value. And think of the remote control and the Google Wave. This is how it ends. This is how the discussion ends if you end up thinking about the functional value. If you think about the other two, then they're not just simply important, they're crucial, because this is why we choose things, why we buy things. We actually don't pay as much attention as we think ourselves to the functional parts. Because if we're buying a car, it is supposed to drive. If it wouldn't be driving, it wouldn't be a car. So it's for the customer, functional kind of features are the, well, if you will, it's a hygiene factor. So it just has to be there. But the value-adding parts are typically social and emotional, and this is what service designers actually design for. So not only this is interesting, but I promise if you still haven't thought about that until now, then you will start noticing this in the things around you, because it even very easily translates to the digital services. So a few years ago, I actually did a little really research on what is it that people expect when services or products are being digitized. So if we have a product or a service that functions well in, let's say, physical world, and when company wants to digitize, so what is it that the customers are expecting from that? And the expectations are actually super predictable. There's three things. First of one is they expect it to be quick. So if you compare, let's say, face-to-face service versus digital, you expect the digital to be quicker. And then there's a whole bunch of different examples, but one of the examples that you think about, one of the services that seems is the keyword, seems quicker than in analog world is Bolt. But the taxi, if you think about it, the taxi doesn't actually come quicker. It drives pretty much the same amount of time, but you feel that it comes quicker because you don't have to wait out in the cold without knowing when it will show up. But you can actually check at any given point. You can check it on your app and you see where it's driving. So you have this sense of, being aware of the process. It's actually very similar to how people are waiting for the buses on the bus stop. The bus will not come faster if you check the timetable, but for some reason you still do that, so you're kind of in control, feeling that, 7 minutes and it shows up. So it's about the feeling. It's not about it actually the service being quicker. The second suggestion was about it being easy, which is once again, first of all, very subjective. So something that might be easy for somebody might be very difficult for somebody else. And it's once again, it's a pure illusion. Again, I'm not sure if you're aware of what N26 is. It's a digital bank, so it's a purely online bank that does not have any branches or any, they probably have some customer support if you call them, but everything happens through an app. And in general, as I'm working a lot in the financial sector, then in general, the perception of the banks is that they're complicated, they're slow, and everything is just so overwhelming. And the kind of idea is that N26 makes everything go so easy. And if you rationally try to analyze the onboarding process, becoming the customer, or you think of how much time you actually spend in the app looking for the right service or the right button to make some maybe non-standard transaction, it's actually a lot more complicated than to just, ask advice from a teller in a branch office. but you for some reason have this feeling that it actually works quicker. However, you spend much more of your own time figuring it out. And the third one, once again, not so surprising, it's about being in control. So sort of feeling the power in your hands instead of the hands of the clerk helping you. And here, the example could be something that, some of you probably have on your wrist, or if not specifically that brand, then something similar, is that we feel we're in control of our fitness level or our health. And if you actually think about it, are you? You just, more or less know what happens, but do you change anything? Are you actually controlling your health levels based on that? Well, that's a topic for discussion. So it's once again, sort of you want to feel in control, but you don't need to necessarily be in control. And that's a huge difference. So what we design for, or what we bring on the table for the companies as service designers, very, very often, I hope this doesn't sound too touchy-feely, because God forbid we also do the Excel tables if it's needed. we prefer not to, but what we try to bring into this discussion of creating services is actually what is the feeling of emotional and social value that the service should be providing, because the functional part is usually pretty easily being handled by the company, and if anything, we need to reduce the number of functional opportunities or ideas that companies bring to the table, because there could be potentially just simply too many, and we need to squeeze it down a bit. So in essence, this is what we do. And I promise just 2 more slides left, nothing much. I'm even surprisingly quite on time. What to do if this is something that you feel you would want to look into? I think the easiest step is actually to read a few books. And of course, there is a whole bunch of books that are called service design or service design tools or whatever else, or design thinking, a whole huge amount of them. But here are a few that I personally would recommend. And if you notice, only one has actual service design term in them, because I would say that, it's not so much about the methodology, it's about understanding human behavior and human thinking. And this is what you need to kind of start with and start focusing on, because the process, it's actually super simple. There's a bunch of steps you need to take. There's a bunch of tools you need to use, but it's a lot more important to understand why do you need to take those steps. If we're doing customer research, why it's a good idea to do observations and interviews, and why it's the terrible idea to do questionnaires. This is something that it might seem like a random example, but it's an actual thing that everybody tends, if they want to find out how people think, they tend to do questionnaires, and that's actually the worst thing you could possibly do for that. So you need to understand why service design actually applies these methods, and why does it have these 4 stages. And for that, you need to look a lot broader than just books on service design. If you want to study or do some courses, of course, there's a whole bunch of courses of introduction to service design. I do a lot of those myself. At TalTech, we have a course for master students where we actually invite companies to bring us challenges, and the students solve challenges for actual organizations. Last year, we designed services for Tallinn Airport right before the lockdown, so we were kind of good with timing. But once again, there's a lot of course, programs and trainings that are called service design. But my strong suggestion is actually you can do one of those, so of course, just to get the grasp, but you cannot be a 100% service designer by education. Service design is a method like project management. So there's some kind of programs as well, which are purely project management, but you need to be a project management in something or of something. So you need to be, if it's project management of digital products, you actually need to be a specialist in the digital world, or if it's construction works, then you need to be expert in construction. So that is just a tool that helps you. The same thing is with service design. You can be service designer, but you also need to be a specialist in a certain field. So that's sort of a complementary tool that you need to learn and acquire. And this is very important to remember. This is why I never recommend anybody to go and study service design as a main major in university, for example, because it's simply is useless. You become, well, maybe it's a bit harsh, but you become sort of just an artist without any business context. And in service design, understanding business context is actually crucial for this thing to work. So if you're interested and if you kind of want to more precise recommendations of where to go to study or what to start with, then feel free to reach out to me in social media. LinkedIn works, Facebook works a bit less, but I also check those messages as well. So if you really feel that this is something that you would know more about, then just go ahead and reach out. And if not, then I wish you a nice evening. So if you just wanted to hear me, feel free to switch off. If you have any questions or you have posted anything, then stay tuned and let's talk.
They do have questions. So we have a few of them. I will read them on my phone. So sorry, I'm not looking up all the time. Right. So one is asking, Amaril is asking, from your experience, is it more common to hire a service designer from outside of company and product designers from inside?
What's the difference? This is again the play of terms. So what is service designer? What is product designer? That's a very...
is there any difference? Maybe there isn't.
Well, it depends who calls what. So as I said, I have a quite kind of different experience as a consultant, so working in-house and as someone external. And product, I assume that what is meant by product designer is somebody who is actually designing hands-on with a graphical design, I'm guessing. So actually, they're part of the service design team. So we somehow metaphorically describe it, we have a line of work where you would have a service designer who is looking at the project in general. So service designer project follows the project from beginning till the end and puts the main emphasis of his or her work in the research part. So talking to the customer, analyzing the business needs, putting together business needs and customer views, defining what the problem is and what is rational to solve. And then after that, service designer works hand in hand with the UX designer, so to kind of create and design the first wireframes or the first draft of the 2B user experience. And when the first flows are done, then we move on to the UI. But then again, the service designer works hand in hand with the UI designers to kind of make sure that that whatever was uncovered from the research is still kind of there until the end, because it's quite typical to do the research by service designer and then hand it over to the product team, and then in the end you just see that there is no connection. Whatever the outcomes of the research was, that it was just for the sake of research and the product team just designed something else. So how we do it, or how I recommend to do it, is to have this service designer or however you want to call him, actually, it doesn't matter too much, kind of going through the whole project and carrying these customer insights up until very end.
Okay. You mentioned also that involving or taking those buyers who are would like to work with you, involve them, then the outcome is better and they will take it as their own. So how do you involve? What are the best practices to make it happen?
Best practice is just very easy. It's just we show up and we start asking questions. So the format is typically there is the format of workshops. So it's just a meeting with a fancy name. And probably we also use a bit more kind of playful methods to extract the ideas. But one very important thing there is that maybe it's from my side very subjective, but it's very important to engage these stakeholders into the research part. So usually they haven't seen the customers in a very, very long time face to face, and they haven't really talked to customers. So if you manage, the best practice here, I would say, is that if you manage to push out those people to do customer interviews and to kind of collaborate on the research in a proper way. So you, of course, need to kind of explain them how to do it first. But if you manage to get them in the field, they generally, after that, they come back shocked and become super collaborative.
Okay, nice. So let's take also some questions from YouTube. Martin McLean, seems like a great deal of value is added by being from the outside service designer. Are inside in-house service product designers doomed?
Again, having been in-house as well and having helped to build up a service design team in one organization, I can actually say that, of course, well, it's better to have internal service designer than to have none, of course. But if you're working inside company, you become very quickly biased because your material well-being, you as an employee of the company, is connected to business goals. And business goals are essentially efficiency. So it's, cutting back from features that seem to business as nice to have, for example. It's about, business efficiency, which might be very heavily and very often is contradicting with user experience kind of improvements. So, of course, it's possible, but it's very, very hard to be internal, but still have be very strong advocate for the user experience, for users' view.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. And some more. How do you make your customers to go for creating the social, emotional value, but if they still think that the functional part is so important?
Well, some are the ones who actually pay attention and listen to. With some, we do a lot of this customer research part involvement. So we take them with us to the interviews to help them hear the user's kind of perspective on the whole thing, and they hear that the social and emotional plays a huge part. And actually, to be honest, majority, when they start thinking about themselves as being customers of other services, they pretty quickly understand that it is actually this way. That as soon as you put this whole handbag example or car purchasing example in front of them, they very quickly realize that it actually makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's comes easily, and after that, finding the value is even easier.
Well, yes, if they're willing to collaborate, then it's a lot easier. But getting this information is out of customers. What kind of social and emotional value do you want? That might be a bit challenging because nobody actually would come and admit that I bought a Ferrari because I'm having a midlife crisis and I want, young girls to pay attention to me. Nobody really answers that. So you have to be very kind of creative in your interviews to figure this out.
But does the service designers also go to the field and ask the customers, or they act as a customers, or?
Well, there are different methods. So this acting as customers, it's called service safari. There's also ethnographic research, which means that we go and observe. We don't interfere. We kind of look at how people behave. And when we see patterns, then we start asking. So we kind of interview them. But this is, again, sort of open-end in the interviews so that you ask the question and you listen. You kind of don't suggest the answers yourselves. So that's kind of about exploring the different points of views.
Okay, very nice. So I have one from Triin also. How would you differentiate studying service design at TalTech and at Pärnu College?
I think the background is a bit different. So of course, again, service design is service design. And I promise you that the thing that we teach at TalTech, the double diamond, is still exactly the same, the model of process of service design. But TalTech, at least the department where I'm currently teaching, we're a business school. So we are mostly looking at service design as a tool to improve your business viability. And you have to look at Pärnu College at their background. So they're essentially a hotel management school. So this is the perspective that historically they bring to the table. But once again, if they're working through that prism, we're looking at it through, because they also teach service design at TalTech in IT department. And once again, the design process is the same, but the context is different. So it's about through the IT services. So I would say that, it's all about the kind of general background of the school or the general background of the trainer that is presenting the topic.
But what do you think? How is the best way to get like a service designer? Is it like go to the field, start doing it, or just read before, study before, and then try to sell yourself as a service designer somewhere?
Well, everything, I think pretty much everything in life usually works the best if you just go and start doing it and if you figure out on the go. Maybe there's a few professions where you shouldn't do that, like probably heart surgeon should first make sure he knows what he's doing. But in general, yes, as soon as you acquire principles, there is no such thing as, incorrect service design process. And it's... I see it with my junior colleagues that very often when they start a service design projects, they sort of try to do everything by the book. And they're not really looking at the process of the specific project or what's happening in actual life. They just know that, next I have to do this and this and this. And when you practice it enough, you sort of start again recognizing patterns and maybe we kind of change place. Maybe we don't do customer interviews just yet. Like as an example, so you sort of start figuring it out on the go. So in service design, I would say the most critical thing is not even knowledge of the tools and the process and all that. The most critical thing in service design is your general kind of awareness of how life works. So the more experience of different fields you have, the more knowledge of kind of bits of knowledge of very different areas you have, the better service designer you are, because essentially our job is to connect the dots that are seemingly not really connected. So you kind of take experience from one field and apply it in the other. That is the biggest value that you can possibly add.
Okay, thank you. So if you have any other questions, all the listeners who are there, so you can add them here, send to Jana, or maybe even post to this same event comments. whatever is your channel, probably you get the answer. Definitely we'll find you some answers.
Yes.
So thank you, Anna, for this presentation. It was absolutely engaging and educational.
Well, it was still recording for people online, which is surprising on whatever.
Yeah, we had more. We had like 60, 70, but there was a little technical problem there. So maybe some just excluded. But yes, thank you also for all participators, all the listeners there. So if there's no any other questions, then we can wrap it up, and we will add the video also to the YouTube channel and add it also to the Facebook page. So thanks and see you again.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Bye bye.